Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Telemaker Review. It is 7:14 p.m., Friday the 7th of February, 2025, 21st century. I want to do a bit more of an old school podcast tonight where I just sort of ruminate and talk and, go on a walkabout because I've dropped a lot of very heavy information on you in the last, 5 or 6 podcasts. Very structured, very distilled, and proven out. It's pretty hard to deny my thesis. There's other interpretations of it, many ways to interpret it. Some people go with mythology and, um, stuff like that, but it is what it is. This is the situation that we're in. And no matter what I say, it's important that we always stay on our own path. And our path, me and those who listen to me and understand what I'm saying, is the path of love and unfoldment. And that is not just for the people who love us back. It's for everybody. And even the reptiles. They're not going to receive it, but it doesn't matter. You have to push it out there. Okay? It's not a sentiment. It's just live and let live kind of thing. And understand that the Creator always has a reason for doing what he does. There's always a reason. You're never alone, you're never lost, you're never dead. You can only lose yourself. You can only kill yourself as a spiritual being by failing to continue on with the sometimes what seems to be nearly impossible task of loving life and loving people. And I'll be the first to admit that it's hard at times. I mean, to be honest, it's hard even inside my extended family sometimes, right? And be human when you need to be human. If you can't avoid getting angry, then get angry. But don't stay angry. Don't let anger fester like the coals in a fire. Just get it out of your system. If you offended anybody through your anger, apologize. And try not to get angry. But anger is really, when you think about it, one of the most easy to understand emotions right now. That's something worth looking at. There's a definition of anger I want to share with you.
In section 45 of Counsels and Maxims, Schopenhauer advises us on how to govern the expression of our emotions, especially our negative emotions, towards our enemies. He writes, "To speak angrily to a person, to show your hatred by what you say or by the way you look, is an unnecessary proceeding, dangerous, foolish, ridiculous, and vulgar. Anger or hatred should never be shown otherwise than in what you do. And feelings will be all the more effective in action, insofar as you avoid the exhibition of them in any other way. It is only cold-blooded animals whose bite is poisonous." That's all of section 45. Schopenhauer getting a little bit ruthless with us here at the end of chapter 3. I kind of can hear the ring of the knife being pulled from the sheath. if you are angry and hateful towards a person, for God's sake, don't don't express it in speech or in dirty looks. Express it in action. In other words, don't talk about revenge. Do revenge. And he says you'll find it to be much more emotionally satisfying when your emotions are actually accomplished through your actions, if that's the way it's going to be, rather than talking about them. To do otherwise dangerous, foolish, ridiculous, and vulgar. And something of a proverb here at the end. It is only the cold-blooded animal that has a poisonous bite. So if you wish, you have a genuine hostility, if you genuinely wish to inflict harm upon your enemy, you have to be cold-blooded yourself. You have to restrain your expression of emotion, restrain the way that you comport your face when you look at the person. So for God's sake, we're playing for keeps here, right? We're in the realm of action, not in the realm of emotionally venting, right? This is the action of an undisciplined person. So, bit of advice here on the topic of vengeance. It seems not entirely pleasant to consider, but then again, if vengeance and negative emotions are going to come up, well, then they ought to come up in action and not in speech, or maybe I should say, in action or not at all. Let them go. Do without them. So. That's section 45 of Schopenhauer's Counsels and Maxims. Section 46 is the final section of chapter 3 on our relation to others. We'll talk about that in the next video. Thanks for watching today.
So that's how Schopenhauer advises that we manage our anger, that you save it for activity. Now, he makes a blatant reference to the reptilian there. Only the cold-blooded have a truly dangerous bite. He's talking about the venomous bite of the serpent. But I was looking for the video and I couldn't find it, so I'll just tell you. But Schopenhauer had this brilliant insight on anger, and he said that anger was the result of ideals that you couldn't realize in the world. Okay? And that's something that is going to be a big part of our lives for the next number of years. I don't know how many, definitely 2 or 3, and maybe many more than that. I don't know for sure. But we don't control the world. We can only control our world, right? And if I were to answer any, or to offer any counsel to people on how to cope with the injustices in the world, my greatest counsel would be simply do not contribute to them. Okay? We are only judged by what we do. And I must also say that, in my opinion, the world can reach such diabolical states that you do need to separate yourself from it. That you need to be able to leave the machine. You need to be able to walk away from the collective and live your own life. This is something that I think all serious people are going to have to consider. And not just now, but also in the immediate future. It's going to become more and more of an imminent reality. Now, I've gone out of my way in very deliberate, very calculated podcasts to explain things. How the world we're living in is influenced by worlds we don't see with our eyes. You can see them with the world of imagination if you practice, which might be the secular definition of meditation, which has tremendous value irregardless if you believe in a supreme spiritual being as the origin of life or not. Meditation has value even independent of those considerations. Its principal utility is opening the inner vision to the inner landscape, to the world of spirit, which operates completely different than this world, including the metrics of time by which it operates. It can be very difficult at times to be the champion of the Creator as the resolution of all problems, because the Creator really works in a way that mankind finds it very difficult to understand, and never in a timely manner. Every one of us alive now, every one of you listening to this podcast now, may well be working off or living the result of, the reaction of, actions you did a million years ago, incarnated on this planet. Now, you could ask reasonable questions. Like, if all of these systems are meant to teach us, then why are they scattered to the four winds? Why is cause and effect scattered to the four winds, except when it's observed in a scientific experiment that has been proven true as a thesis and can be repeated? Like, the cause of boiling water will have the effect of turning the water to vapor. Okay? The cause of applying flame to water will change the form of the water to vapor. Cause and effect. Very simple, straightforward example. But why would you be paying for karma? Or why would you have karma in your life path that you created 100,000, 500,000, a million years ago? I do have an answer. A lot of people won't like it, but I think it's the truth. To even understand these laws, you have to begin a relationship with the Creator. You have to begin a relationship of experimentation within the creation, which is several dimensions. Although we live in the physical, it goes over a number of dimensions. And all journeys begin with faith. You have to believe it to even put any effort into it. But that's true for anything, right? You have to believe you're going to be able to play the guitar one day to even spend all of the hours practicing the chords. You have to believe you're going to be able to defend yourself one day to spend the thousands of hours in a dojo to get a black belt. You have to believe that the thousands of hours you spend studying and the thousands of dollars you spend getting a post-secondary education are going to result in a job. And there are no guarantees to any of these things. Literally everything a human being does begins with faith. You have to believe. And hardcore atheists find that difficult to contend with. That to begin a relationship with the Creator, you have to believe. You have to believe that 100 hours of meditation, an hour a day for 100 days, which is 4 months, right? That would be about 120 days. Will yield results. What I've observed is everyone I've met who's made significant ground in the field of consciousness has really not had any choice. The life they were given was so bereft of any normalcy and so bereft of the possibility of happiness. They had to make wild and reckless investments. And God is a wild and reckless investment. Mark Cuban's not thinking about God. He's investing in his life. Jeff Bezos isn't thinking about God. He's investing in his life. But in their own ways, they had to believe to get where they are. And so the maxim that everything begins with belief is true. You have to believe that a woman who you may suspect is outside your league is going to say yes to going to dinner and a movie with you. To even ask, you have to believe the possibility of a yes is there. Faith is indispensable. And it's absolutely indispensable in the spiritual life as well. Why am I saying all this like an idiot? Blah, 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 blah. Because although you might not be able to see it right now, believe me when I tell you that there is perfect justice in this world. Perfect justice. It's here. So everything that seems unjust now only seems unjust because we don't understand it. Why would the Creator put us on what Courtney Brown of the Farsight Institute calls a prison planet? Why would our consciousness, our immortal spiritual being, be put into a human body on this third rock from the sun, in the outer reaches of the Milky Way, in a remote part of this universe and this galaxy? Why? I can't give you an answer, but I can tell you there is an answer. And that one day we'll all know. And there's really no other way to look at life. And then when you start to get the answers to your questions, they're so outrageous, not only in what you get as the answer, but even more outrageous is how you get the answer. And I can tell you, it's set up in such a way that you can't really tell other people. And this is why the bulk of all spiritual work on this planet by people who've committed to it, whether they be sincere Catholic priests or sincere Torah rabbis or sincere Buddhist monks or sincere yogic practitioners like Sadhguru, that all they can really do is try to give you a little bit of inspiration and motivation, like a personal trainer in a gym, to do the work yourself. Because the answers don't just take place in the physical world. They don't just take place in the inner world, in the world of spirit, the world of your imagination or dreams. The most difficult questions I've had answered in my life are answered through a complex sequence of interrelated things between my internal life and my external reality in a concatenated chain of events to answer a very difficult question that is kind of a deep metaphysical question about why something is the way it is. And by the time you get the answer, you can't really tell anybody else. The Buddhists have this saying, if enlightenment were that easy, everybody would just tell their brother-in-law. You have to do your own work. The most important thing to be done to separate us from the intense negativity that we're mired in on this planet, and it is an intense negativity, is to begin by disentangling yourself from the lies in your life. To have the courage to tell yourself the truth, even when that truth has no companions in the world. I'm going to take a moment to speak to some of you who've reached out to me in the last 6 weeks or so. Speak to you directly, especially those of you who contact me with something like, in the message, "This is almost unbelievable, but..." something like that. I can assure you you're sending the message to the right person. It's not unbelievable to me. Not unbelievable to me at all. Okay? The wildest things I've heard by Substack message, Discord, direct email, comments on YouTube or Rumble, none of it strikes me as strange. It's all part of a new normal I live in. Now, people who begin to talk about these things generally specialize. So a saint specializes in helping a person realize themselves in the journey to self, which is an aspect of the divine, which once realized makes you saintly yourself. A good Catholic priest will help somebody through difficult emotional problems and help them understand demonic influence and set them on a path of virtue to keep them clean and free of this kind of pollution. A good Buddhist abbot at a monastery or a lay Buddhist, a Buddhist teacher working with lay Buddhists who meet in a public place, and those Buddhists go to work as public prosecutors or public defenders or nurses or construction workers. They're trying their best to get you at a place of peace and a place where you don't generate more negative actions. You don't produce more negative actions in your world. harmful to yourself and harmful to the world. So everybody's got specializations. Even the good rabbis and even the good aspects of Judaism have a kind of a specialization, which is about investing in the world. And it's a good principle, and a lot of the spiritual systems would be well served to pay attention to that, because we have to live here, right? Even if this isn't our permanent home, we have to live here. And we want it to be good and make it a little bit better than it was when we came. My specialty is darkness. I'm most comfortable talking to and helping people beset by the most diabolical forms of darkness. Ritual abuse, multi-generational Masonic or Kabbalistic abuse, people who were enslaved as children to do things children were not meant to do, people attacked by very dark forces in their dreams and their life, physically, paranormally. I'm hanging my sign out. That's my specialty. And it's largely a result of this journey my creator put me on with these nonfiction books and how much they've taught me. And when I do podcasts like The Final Binary or Uniform Control, I don't want you to hate people. I just want you to understand what's going on here. Okay? Because it's like the more informed you are in the market, the better investments you're going to make, and you're going to make more money, right? Or you're not going to lose money. I want you to invest your energy and your love in the right place. And I want you to be able to cultivate that energy, because that's the energy that the world needs now. And believe it or not, you people beset by the darkness will bring more light into the world than the average person who never encountered darkness once you understand the darkness. Because darkness is light in a dormant phase. And the more people I can help through this journey, this maze of confusion, that's the most I can do for the world at this point in my life. Because I came through the dark path. I don't mean that I went and I studied darkness. I went and studied to be a black magician like Milarepa. But I just had to live for years and years and years without any real love or support in my life. And extreme negativity. And people that were, if not possessed, at least demonically bothered. But I think possessed. I put it down on paper, so I'm not going to contradict myself. My father was possessed. And as I've said numerous times on this podcast, possession is not what people think it is. That these movies do a tremendous disservice. It's much more subtle than that. Much more subtle. Yeah, just had to go get a coffee there. So, keeping on with this podcast. I mean, everything you've been told in the last 5 or 6 podcasts, maybe 7, are just little insights into the control on this planet, which begins at the thinking process, right? You know, that Sean Stone interview with the guy talking about the reptilians. I mean, he just says it. You know, they control banking, they control our religion, they control everything now. Just stop and think about that for a moment, okay? And the heads of this religion are completely immersed in this underworld culture. Literally, reptiles prefer to live underworld. But at the same time, the spiritual person goes, but I'm here. And that can't be an accident, because the creator doesn't make errors. And that's true. Now you can go blue in the face trying to figure this out. You know, you can just dedicate your whole life to trying to figure it out in a subject-object way. And it's a curious inquiry, the metaphysical inquiry, but you don't make much spiritual growth. And that's what you're here to do. And that's the only thing that he has even the slightest chance of us winning and overcoming. And so I guess you could say that the reason I do the Talamanca Review and the reason I write these books is to try to crack the walnut shell of hardened consciousness in people so that they can see what I'm talking about. And that they can see that, look, this is real. I mean, it's overwhelming when you start machine gunning various details, you know, like the final binary, the uniform of control. All of these podcasts I've done, these recorded the straw man. Okay? Now, I find even myself indecisive sometimes about, you know, what to say about certain things. I can tell you that we are in a very big battle right now, and it's not just on the surface of the planet. It's not just in the news. It's not just human beings. It's as Courtney Brown said. Because if we can't tie this off at a certain point, and this freak show called the human race, and especially the human race of the last 100 years, if this freak show just keeps going on, I can tell you at a certain point, the higher forces in this game are just going to tie it off. And tie it off means end the experiment on this planet. And that would be a bad outcome for everybody. And if you get into all that Galactic Council stuff, which I don't pay too much attention to, although it's probably real, then you know that there are a significant percentage of the higher order races in this galaxy just think that this experiment on this planet should end. And I don't think it's going to. And in fact, I know it's not going to. But One of the struggles I have as a podcaster is what to say and how to say it. And generally, I don't censor myself. Some of the podcasts I do, when you're done digesting what was said in the podcast, you're going to be livid. You're going to be angry. And I suppose you have a right to be angry. But remember what Schopenhauer said about anger. That don't show it in your emotions, show it in your actions. Now, this particular instance, in this war we're in, which really manifests as a public conversational consciousness that deliberately tries to keep us stupid, to make you look like a complete idiot when you start to talk about the things I talk about on the Talamanca Review. When you start to tell the real truth about what's going on in an articulate and succinct way, you're going to sound crazy to 9 out of 10 people. But if you keep doing it long enough, you're only going to sound crazy to 8 out of 10 people. And the 2 out of the 10 that you convinced are going to start proselytizing when they digest the information. And that's the only way it spreads. And where Schopenhauer said the distillation of anger to action is the best response, because the satiation of the feeling of anger is to realize it in an action that corrects the situation, which I guess is a euphemism for vengeance. That won't work in this situation. This is an entirely unique situation, because every time we go to negative emotions, we're right in their field of expertise, the reptilian field of expertise, right? Now, if you fight a blind man, you'd have to be a real moron to lose. If you fight a blind man in a pitch black room, you're probably not going to win. Think about that for a moment. Okay? It sounds flippant, but there's actually a lot of wisdom in that. We can't fight these reptilians with anger. The only way out of this is to just take that negative emotion, which I make you feel when I write these books and I do some of these podcasts, but I've gone out of my way to balance them out with deliberately spiritual podcasts. Okay? You got to alchemize that anger into something spiritually productive, because that's the only way to win. It's completely and totally counterintuitive to the human instinct. But the spiritual man is not the physical psychological man. It is a completely different creature. And the spiritual man, and when I say man, I mean men and women, the spiritual man is the only being that can win this fight. And it's riddled with all of these paradoxes. Many people in the past have known what I'm telling you tonight. If you know what to look for, you can see it in their writings. I think that this deal in Gaza is a very nasty piece of business. I know what this is leading to. It's leading to the temple. I know what the temple is. Let me spend a few minutes on that. It should have been part of the final binary, but once I get up to about 50 minutes, I start to wind down and close off the podcast anywhere between 50 and 55 minutes. I think that's long enough. You know, I think it's long enough. So I'm going to tell you straight up. If the third temple gets built, if we are brought under Noahide law globally, what this will mean is the world has been consolidated under a uniform and regulated system of law. The higher forces, the other races that are disgusted by what's done on this planet to human beings, will be forced to back off or risk taking on extreme amounts of negative causal force into their own systems and into their own worlds, because they would be violating spiritual law. This is the real reason why you're seeing so much extraterrestrial activity now. Because the Temple of Solomon represents the triumph of the reptilian religion. It represents the triumph of the reptilian system of organization here, which in its own way will bring peace and harmony, but only by creating a hierarchical system of living in which 99.9% of the human race will be treated as second-class citizens. And we will have no rights. We could be killed at any time. Our free speech will be gone. The expression of any spiritual ideas will result in death or incarceration, because the reptilian religion is about the suppression of the growth of consciousness, masquerading as the magical presence of God, the key word being magic. And the temple is a magical construct. And when I say magic, I mean black magic. So this is the predicament we're in. Let's maybe hear somebody else talk about it.
This video will probably make you angry, so here's how it goes. Earlier this week, Israeli Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir decided to visit the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, as it was a special fasting day in Judaism that commemorates the destruction of the temple. Nothing wrong with that so far, right? He didn't go to provoke or to start a war, just to visit the holiest site in Judaism. But apparently, it was a big crime against humanity, because 24 hours later, the UN Security Council held a meeting on his visit to Temple Mount, and countries condemned Israel for disrupting the status quo, basically causing conflict. Listen, it took the UN days until it called for a Security Council meeting on the Ukraine-Russia war. It didn't hold an emergency meeting when the Islamic regime in Iran executed protesters, or after more than 6,000 Christians were massacred in Nigeria in 2022. Heck, not even on Venezuela or Cuba, but an Israeli minister who simply visited the holy site in Judaism and walked on Temple Mount, which is under Israeli sovereignty and territory, by the way. 24 hours later, the UN Security Council is meeting on this. What a shame. The Temple Mount is where King Solomon built the first temple in the year 957 BC, and later Jews built the second temple in the year 352 BC. The Christians also built a church named after Saint Mary of Justinian in the year 561 CE, all of which happened before the Al-Aqsa Mosque or the Dome of the Rock were built. No disrespect, But the first temple was built 1,662 years before Al-Aqsa. But today, Jews and Christians are not allowed to pray on Temple Mount because it disrupts the peace in the region. Who are they to tell me what to do on my land? Wherever you put a shovel here, you will find that Jewish history, not a Palestinian one, because it doesn't exist. I don't buy this BS of Israel violating the status quo. What disrupting peace is lies. Because with one hand, the Palestinians are saying that they come in peace, but with the other hand, they are throwing rocks on Jews and Israeli security forces. If the Palestinians care so much about the Temple Mount, then why are they treating it like this? Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian dictator, always travels to the UN to cry out loud about how much he wants to make peace, but the Israelis are the obstacle to peace. No, terrorism is the obstacle to peace. Paying terrorists and their families is the obstacle to peace. Not going up on Temple Mount or building homes in Judea and Samaria. Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian dictator, would rather travel to the other side of the world, to New York City, to talk about his desire for peace, but refuses to drive 20 minutes from Ramallah to Jerusalem to actually make peace. He is a liar. In Isaiah 56 verse 7, it is written, "I will bring them to my holy mountain of Jerusalem, and will fill them with joy in my house of prayer. I will accept their burnt offerings and sacrifices, because my temple will be called a house of prayer for all nations." The Temple Mount.
Nothing strengthens faith more than witnessing biblical prophecies unfold in reality. Recently, news broke that a ceremony for the Third Temple has just taken place, discussed even by Joe Rogan on his podcast. This profound event impacts Christians, Jews, and others, bringing us closer to events linked to the second coming of Christ. With this development, pressing questions arise. What does this mean for Christians? How might it affect peace in the region? Join us as we look into Joe Rogan's announcement that the ceremony for the Third Temple has just happened. The ceremony for the Third Temple. The team of architects working on plans for the Third Temple has honored Ezekiel's prophecy, guided by insights from scholars like Rashi, Vilna Gaon, Malbim, and Ramchal, who made key verses of the book of Ezekiel clear and accessible. Now, a precise model of the Third Temple is ready, created at a scale of 1/50. This model will be on display at a new visitor center in Jerusalem, set to open in 2025. The planned temple, a 150-meter square structure with varying heights, will be visible across Jerusalem once construction starts after approval from the municipality. So, where do things stand now? Why is rebuilding this temple even necessary? The most intriguing details are still to come. The Jerusalem municipality is already laying out future plans to welcome visitors from around the world, including roadmaps, electrification, trams, and all necessary infrastructure. For those who view Scripture as a literal fulfillment of God's promises to the Jewish people and the land of Israel, rebuilding the temple is essential. In the vision of the new covenant for Israel, the Bible describes a time when a righteous descendant of David will rule in Jerusalem, bringing justice and righteousness to the earth. In that age, Jerusalem will be a place of safety, the temple will stand once more, and the Levitical priests will perform their sacred duties. This passage portrays the Messianic age when Israel is fully restored to its land, with the temple complete and a descendant of David on the throne. If this vision is truly meant for the future, what signs point to the preparation for a third temple in Israel today? Since 1987, when the temple movement began preparing for the Third Temple, efforts to make this vision a reality in the 21st century have been gradually moving forward. While modern Israel and many Jewish people worldwide remain secular, Orthodox Jews believe these individuals won't have a role in rebuilding the temple, as this work is seen as deeply spiritual. It is Orthodox Jews who have reestablished the Sanhedrin, the religious council responsible for overseeing legal matters related to the temple, and who are determined to see it properly rebuilt. For Orthodox Jews, rebuilding the temple is essential for the redemption of the world, which they believe depends on its restoration. Gershon Salomon, director of the Temple Mount Faithful, leads an organization focused on preparing Israeli society to embrace and promote the rebuilding of the temple. Their efforts have included demonstrations at the Temple Mount, constructing a cornerstone for the temple, and creating various temple-related items. Solomon views the rebuilding of the Third Temple as crucial for completing the redemption of the Jewish people and believes it should be central to Israeli life. However, many religious Jews disagree with this viewpoint, adopting a diaspora mentality that emphasizes a spiritualized perspective, setting aside hope in a literal fulfillment of the prophecies for a future temple. For these Jews, the current political situation on the Temple Mount, with Muslims controlling the site, is acceptable. Leaders of the Temple movement argue that without the Temple, Jewish life isn't at the spiritual level God intended due to the absence of the divine presence from the world. Rabbi Chaim Richman, director of the Temple Institute, emphasizes the connection between achieving a new level of spiritual growth and the rebuilding of the temple. His institute has already produced all the ritual vessels needed for the temple's operation and is actively training priests for this future work. For Orthodox Jews dedicated to restoring the temple, they believe that both the world's issues and those faced by the Jewish people can only be resolved through its rebuilding. So are we any closer to the reconstruction of the temple today? The world remains strongly opposed to Israel's claims over Jerusalem, let alone the highly contested Temple Mount. In fact, Israeli law currently bans Jewish prayer at the site, and those who visit often face opposition from Muslims, such as the women in black, who vigilantly monitor Jewish activity there. Additionally, Islamic authorities deny a Jewish temple ever existed at this site. Yet recent events have helped advance the temple movement's vision, bringing the goal of rebuilding the temple within reach. To counter the claim that a Jewish temple never stood here, findings by archaeologists decades ago revealed that the site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which Muslims associate with Abraham, was previously a place of Jewish ritual preparation. Evidence for this came from British archaeologist Robert Hamilton's report, documenting excavations of the mosque's foundation after an earthquake in 1927. Beneath the mosque's floor, he found remains of a Jewish mikveh, a ritual pool used for purification, dating to the Second Temple era, when Jews immersed here before entering the temple grounds. These findings, kept hidden in British archives to avoid upsetting Muslim officials, now stand as evidence that the ancient temple once occupied the modern Temple Mount and served as a site of Jewish worship. The Sanhedrin's preparations for the Third Temple. The Sanhedrin has been taking important steps to prepare for the future temple service. One of their projects is planting a biblical temple forest, which will provide the agricultural resources needed for the Third Temple. Rabbi Hillel Weiss, a spokesman for the Sanhedrin, explained that the temple served as a vital link between the land of Israel and the divine. While sacrifices are often thought of as involving animals and blood, the majority of them were made from plants grown around the country. Rabbi Richman, also a member of the Sanhedrin, is leading an effort to bring the sacred red heifer back to Israel. According to the Book of Numbers, the ashes of the red heifer, mixed with water, are essential for purifying Jews so they can serve in the temple. Over a span of about 1,000 years during the First and Second Temples, only 9 red heifers were used in the purification ritual. Jewish tradition holds that the 10th will be used by the Messiah. Richman and other rabbis at the Temple Institute are working closely with an Israeli cattleman, an expert in animal husbandry, to make this possible. The cattleman is using advanced methods, such as implanting frozen Red Angus embryos from North America into Israeli domestic cattle. It's important to note that a red heifer cannot be brought to Israel from abroad, as it must be born in the land of Israel and cannot have ever worn a yoke. This project represents years of research at the Temple Institute, combining ancient religious teachings with modern scientific techniques. The Sanhedrin and the Temple movement have been holding reenactments of temple ceremonies to train those from the priestly class, known as Kohanim. This training includes special schooling on the responsibilities of the priests, the use of ritual vessels created for the Third Temple, and practice with a newly built altar for burnt offerings. This altar is designed to be easily disassembled and reassembled in its permanent location on Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount, where the altar must be built according to Jewish law. When the time comes, it will be moved to its proper place, allowing sacrificial services to begin without delay. Another significant rediscovery by the Temple Institute is the revival of the ancient process of producing biblical crimson dye. This dye was used in the garments of the high priest, the parasheh, the curtain separating the Holy of Holies from the holy place, and mixed with the ashes of the red heifer. Professor Zohar Amar from Bar-Ilan University found that the eggs of the Tolat Shani, crimson worm, still found in Israel today can produce this ancient crimson dye. While the temple movement is working hard to prepare for the rebuilding of the temple, it's widely understood that political action will be necessary to change the current situation, where Muslims control the Temple Mount, in order to allow Jewish access. This may already be in progress. Israel's Supreme Court has made it clear that the issue of the Temple Mount is not a simple legal matter, but a highly sensitive political issue. The court stated that it is not for them to decide, but for the political leaders to give meaning to the historical claim that the Temple Mount is ours. This means the solution must come from political, not legal action. Those familiar with the prophecy in the book of Daniel know that a future political leader, often identified as the Antichrist, will make a deceptive covenant with the Jewish leaders, eventually leading to the rebuilding of the Third Temple. How could this come to pass? One possible scenario comes from a book about the politics surrounding the Temple Mount. The idea is that international involvement may be required, with the United Nations, UNESCO, and regional powers like the Arab League, NATO, or even countries like the US, the EU, and Russia acting as mediators. Any legal or political solution would likely involve interfaith cooperation, with religious leaders from various faiths helping to mediate. Those who study biblical prophecy recognize that the Antichrist will be accompanied by both political and religious leaders, making this kind of international proposal a potential reality. The arrival of the red heifers and the path to the Third Temple. In 2022, 5 red heifers arrived in Israel, causing a lot of excitement among some Jews and Gentiles, who believe these animals are crucial for the construction of the Third Jewish Temple. The heifers are currently kept in a secure, undisclosed location, with plans to move them soon to a visitor center in Shiloh, where the tabernacle of the Lord once...
So, when you watch these, I would say Israeli cultivated propaganda vignettes on X and stuff, like the one I just showed you, 10 of the 15 minutes, you may actually think for a moment, well, what's so bad about this? What's so bad about it, Bruce? I mean, these people just want to practice their religion, Why would you see anything wrong with that, Bruce? Well, a number of reasons, okay? First of all, it's not just the building of the temple. If they can get the temple built, it means that they're probably going to get the Noahide Law. And if they get that, and if they get that through the United Nations, like I said, then we're cut off. We're cut off from all benign forces helping us, okay? Now, here's another little interesting piece on X, okay? Check out this mess. Milei, and this is the Argentinian leader, a descendant of the Nazi Croatian Ustashi, a regular attender of neo-Nazi as well as Zionist rallies. Now, I want you to think about this in context of the 1947 chapter in The Devil in Us. Okay? Why would a Zionist be attending neo-Nazi rallies? Ask yourself that. Dreams of building of a third temple of Solomon and to bring Jewish Messiah to earth and to start the Third World War. People who think the Nazis were the answer to the problem of Zionism are ridiculous. I speculate, I even dare to theorize, which a lot of direct evidence indicates that Hitler, when he did his part of a job and destroyed Germany, killed millions of Slavs and Europeans, throw Slavs under Zionist communism, survived the war, caused a split in Europe that continues today, and that the Zionists moved him to South America, where they dreamed of building a third temple of Solomon together. How else to explain the fascination with Zionism of the present and also the old pro-Nazis? In Jerusalem, Milei said today that he wants the Temple of Solomon to be rebuilt, to fulfill the prophecy that will bring the Jewish Messiah to earth. This implies the destruction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Argentina will face the consequences of his words, that is for sure. The greatest deception of the devil was that he convinced people that he did not exist. Well, I don't agree with that part, but let's just listen to this, what this guy has to say.
Destrucción del segundo templo a manos de los romanos.
This story took place after the destruction of the second temple by the Romans.
Se encontraba Rabbi Akiva y sus colegas observando el monte del templo en ruinas y vieron a un zorro salir del lugar más santo de lo que era el templo.
Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues were observing the Temple Mount in ruins, and they saw a fox leave the holiest of holies in the temple.
No podría haber una escena más desalentadora que aquella.
There could have been no more disheartening scene than that.
Frente a esta terrible escena, los rabinos lloraron en señal de duelo, pero Rabbi Akiva comenzó a reír.
In the face of this terrible scene, the rabbis cried in mourning, but Rabbi Akiva started to laugh.
Sus colegas le preguntaron cómo podía reír frente a semejante tragedia, a lo que Rabbi Akiva respondió.
His colleagues asked how he could possibly laugh in the face of such a tragedy, to which Rabbi Akiva answered,
Hay una profecía acerca de la destrucción que relata que un zorro irrumpiría en el lugar más santo.
There's a prophecy about the destruction that says that a fox will break into the holiest of holies.
También hay otra profecía que relata que este mismo lugar será reconstruido.
There is another prophecy that says that the same place will be rebuilt.
Ahora que veo con mis propios ojos cumplirse la primera profecía,
Now that I see with my own eyes the first prophecy come true,
me río de alegría y esperanza, ya que de seguro se cumplirá la segunda profecía.
I laugh in joy and full of hope, as the second prophecy will surely come true.
And there you have it, folks, okay? So make of it what you will. We are now in the end stages of this plan. And for those of you who've read The Devil in Us, you know that the Nazis and the Zionists are really the same elite consciousness in two different ethnicities. People who believe they deserve the world, kill anybody who oppose them, and believe in depopulation and racial supremacy. One calling themselves the master race, and one calling them the chosen people. For my part, I think they're all just the same thing. And I call them the same thing I call this podcast, Solomon's Bastards. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.